Since I just heard a cell phone, I'd be grateful if you would actually turn off your cell phones. And good evening. Who is it? Throw them out. Good evening. I'm Peter Liotta, Executive Director of the Pell Center, and I would like to introduce my boss, the President of the University, Sister Jane Garrity, for a few remarks. And thank you for telling me about the mic.
Thank you, Peter. How wonderful it is to see this very full house, and I understand that we have people upstairs watching on closed-circuit TV. So it's full, it's wonderful, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here tonight to this lecture of the Pell Center. I have to tell you that when I accepted this position as president, one of the most attractive features of Salve, apart from its students and its faculty, was the notion of the Pell Center. I had gotten to know Senator Pell when I was on the board, and of course, Nuala, who remains our great supporter. We know how consonant Senator Pell's values are with those of Salve, the notion of diplomacy, of nonviolence, and of peace. These are things that we live and work for, and that Senator Pell indeed lived and worked for. So it's a jewel that we have here. It's a jewel that we want to shine each day. May you appreciate this lecture tonight. It's not my pleasure to introduce Romano Prodi, but I did ask Peter when I came in, what should I call him? Prime Minister, President, Professor. It's really my privilege to call you Professor. And now I'm going to turn the mic back over to Peter to introduce Mr. Prodi.
Thank you so much, Sister. And because you've been so patient, and we put people down here and upstairs, my introduction is going to be brief but immensely sincere. We are privileged to have Prime Minister Prodi and his lovely wife, Flavia, here. You're about to meet one of my absolute heroes in my lifetime. Now, Professor Prodi doesn't know this, but in my own work 20 years ago, when I was working for a communist country in Yugoslavia and that country committed suicide, I watched the worst of Europe and the best of Europe. And the best of Europe occurred under the leadership of the European Commission President, Prime Minister Prodi, from 1999 to 2004. I would say that his vision was as deep and as lasting, as sincere as the original vision of Robert Schuman and Jean Monnet of 9 May 1950 with the European steel and coal community. And it's because of leaders like this that we can look to an optimistic future. So it's my honor and privilege to introduce a president, a prime minister, and most importantly, a professore. Please welcome Romano Prodi.
Really, I'm grateful for this invitation. I'm happy to be here, also because I feel myself almost a citizen of Rhode Island. You know, I have accepted to be professor, not anymore in Bologna, my home university, but here in Brown. You know, so it's. For me to be here is an honor and also a personal pleasure. And tonight I've been asked to talk about Europe with a very, let's say, taking headline. Let's say, can Europe change the world? Question mark. Not easy answer, and I shall try to be simple, direct to give this answer, you know, because I think that the world needs Europe. I understand that the European answer is not always, you know, fitted and able to answer to this difficult question. And I try to explain why we have done a lot and why we miss it a lot, you know. European Union European Union, it was the, sometimes politics gives the right answer, and this was the right answer to the World War II tragedy. The end of the war, the Germans, the French, and the Italians, they understood that Europe couldn't go on with a continuous fighting, continuous war, and they put together their life, not only the material resources, but their life. And so we had a small Europe with 6 countries, France, Germany, Italy, Belgium, Holland, and Luxembourg, with the idea of peace. Let us make peace. And this idea has been so strong that in Europe we never had any conflict. You know, Europe was always in war since the Roman Empire. After the Second World War, we didn't have any war inside the borders of European Union. But outside, remember Yugoslavia, we had a terrible war. So peace was kept. And the European experiment was successful. The internal market, common exchange of goods, of people. And then, you know, the small union enlarged in 1973. Denmark, United Kingdom, and Ireland came in. 81 Greece, 86 Spain and Portugal, 95 Austria, Sweden and Finland. And then we had the great enlargement. After the fall of the Berlin Wall, the Eastern European countries, they were alone, dispersed, in really with a question mark about their future. And I have been lucky to be in that period president of the European Commission, and I was a strong supporter of enlargement. In the beginning, in 1999, when we discussed about the possibility of having new countries inside the Union, the mandate was 5 new countries in 10 years. We did 10 new countries in 4.5 years, you know. And this, I think that was, it was very fortunate, because in politics, when you lose the moment, then things are different. And now it's become more and more difficult, you know, to do that. So in 2004, we had Cyprus and Malta, and 8 former Soviet Union member countries, let's say Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Slovenia, and Hungary. Then 2 years later, Bulgaria and Romania. Now the Union is 496 million people. Let's say half a billion people. You know, so it's remarkable big union, and with very important characters, because you know, when is a strange thing. It never happened in the world to enlarge a community of values, you know, to new countries. So it's not a simple job. Sometimes bureaucratic, sometimes difficult. And we worked for 3 years, day and night, to examine the new countries, you know, because this was a mutual examination, you know. We had a common set of rules, complicated, big, sometimes cumbersome, but with some basic principle: democracy, market economy, and basic human rights foundation. And then we proposed to new country to be member of this community and to accept the very complex rules that regulate the community, that are 80,000 bills, you know, so some very complicated. And we divided the legislation in 35 different chapters. Let's say human rights, free movement of goods, free movement of capital, public procurement, agriculture, energy, taxation, environment. And step by step, we discussed it with the different countries. They were approved by the uh, 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 parliaments of all the potential new member countries. We discussed it again, and then the government signed the entrance into the union. And, you know, it was really, really an export of democracy because it was signed by both the sides. There was nothing compulsory or clearly the new membership was accepted and wanted also because of the hope of prosperity, of security, of having advantage. But it was really a fantastic experiment of sharing democracy and the future. And, you know, if we look at the history of the European Union, we had really got a result that have never been, you know, achieved in the world because we never have in our history the example of sharing, let's say, sovereignty and giving up sovereignty to, you know, a higher body, even if only part of sovereignty. And also the solidarity has worked well. If you analyze the the rate of growth of the different European countries, you find that the rate of growth of the new members has always been higher than the rate of growth of the old members. Spain, to give an example, Spain was a very poor country. When Spain entered into the Union, the rate of growth of Spain was much higher than the average of European rate of growth. Greece was the same. And this is absolutely unusual in an economic community. Generally, the core of it grows more than the periphery of it. This was done because there have been a substantial amount of money given to the peripheral areas. So Europe was born not only on democracy, but also on solidarity and regional policy. And this has been the same for the new member countries of former Soviet Union. They have grown up more than the old Europe, let's say. And even now, in the year of crisis, the non-Euro member countries have grown up more than the Euro member countries. And the flow of funds going to Poland or to Hungary is a substantial part of our budget, even if we shall see that our budget is very small compared to the necessity. And so the Europe was born with these fundamental ideas, you know, a little idealistic, but also with the strategy of going step by step in order to get the results. And, you know, if you want the best day of my experience in the European Union is when I was discussing the beginning of the new membership of Romania, you know, in front of the Romanian parliament. And all the political parties were speaking, you know, generally in favor of the membership. Then, after the speech of the, let's say, most important parties, a man came. He defined himself the member of the non-Hungarian minority of the Romanian parliament. You see how complicated. No, I give you the game because you understand. Then I say how complicated it is. How complicated it is, because it's against history. You know, it's for history, but against history. You know, and he made a fantastic speech in favor of Europe. He was an intellectual, you know. I stopped him in the end. I said, "Why are you so warm for it?" He said, "Look, my grandfather was killed because was member of a minority. My father was in exile, and my family in exile because I was member of a minority. I want to enter into the European Union because Europe is a union of minorities. This is the most beautiful definition of Europe, a union of minority, which each state has one vote, in which, of course, the big states have more power, but everybody is respected. Everybody is, and this is idealistic, but it's also the basic ethic foundation of Europe, you know. And so Europe has grown step by step. And then we go to the present. There is a question, will Europe grow indefinitely? Which are the borders of Europe? Then we are out to one of the most difficult problems to solve, because I never succeed in obliging the European Parliament to have a debate on the borders of Europe. Maybe they have been wiser than me, but you know, as member of the as the responsible for the executive, I needed to have this idea: where are the European borders? And especially in this new wave, in which Europe is much more conservative, all the countries are afraid to overstretch, you know, the union, and so you have a complete perspective, and people speak more of digestive capacity than more of what is the idea of Europe that we have, you know. And I give you my idea that I think realistic for the present generation. I think that the former Yugoslavian countries must be member of the Union. Croatia is already ready since a long time, but even the others are ready, plus Albania, because these are part of Europe. But I repeat, we live in a moment in which nobody wants to take the risk of repeating the same policy that has been done in the past. And clearly there are question marks, because Ukraine wants to come in, Georgia, you know, and so I think that in the same time in which we describe the border, we must prepare a policy for the countries who live around. And my proposal, still under discussion, but in this new atmosphere, difficult to accept, is to have around Europe the so-called ring of friends. Let's say countries from Belarus to Ukraine, to Israel, to Morocco, all around, sharing with Europe everything but institutions. Let's say each country can have common market with Europe, common agricultural policy, even not being member of European Union, you know. And then there is the big question mark of Turkey. I keep it separate because the idea could be part of the ring of friends, but there was a very old previous engagement going back to the 60s to have Turkey as a potential member of the Union. So the expectation of the Turkish community is much different from the expectation of our countries. The other countries could be happy to be in the ring of friends. Turkey is not, because the negotiations have started to be a member of the Union. And this is a very complicated case, because negotiations are going on in good faith, but the spirit inside the European countries have changed. And I do remember that when there was a proposal under Finnish presidency by the French President of the Republic to start the negotiation with Turkey, it was a decision that was sudden and unexpected, but everybody agreed. But then, when the French president came back to France, there was such a strong popular reaction that he was obliged to say, look, yes, we start negotiation, but the extension of Europe to Turkey must be under condition of having a popular vote, a referendum. And, you know, in the existing situation, is in many European countries, there will be a vote against the enlargement to Turkey for different reasons, you know, in some cases religious, but not very much, but in many cases because the depressed area of Turkey are so big that they will absorb much of the funds now going to Poland or to Hungary, or other reasons that, well, for example, I was in a meeting of the German Christian Democratic members of the parliament who were telling, look, okay, we are not against it, but it is a problem when in the new parliament the Turkish group will be by far the biggest of European Parliament, because Turkey is growing in population, the European countries are flat. So all these problems are under discussion. So I do think that for a number of years this will be an open problem for Europe. But so it's this is the situation. But after the enlargement, the common market, the democracy, we had another achievement that was absolutely new in the world, the euro. You know that the modern state was born with two pillars, the army and the currency and the money. And it never happened that many countries put the money, the currency together, you know, and this was absolutely an unbelievable achievement. And I have been happy to have pushed it when I was Italian Prime Minister, and then to have, you know, achieved the euro, you know, and I do remember in theory, with the Austrian Chancellor, the midnight in Vienna, I spent the first euro to buy a bunch of flowers for my wife, you know. So it's it was quite, you know, something that and seen from outside, the euro was an incredible achievement, you know. I do remember the impression from China when we had the meeting with the Chinese president. He was asking me every year, but really you will have one currency only. Really, the Deutsche Mark and the French franc will disappear. Really, that. Really, I can take in my reserves the euro. And, you know, it was just a strong political decision for him to have reserved in euro. And, you know, I remember when the euro came in use, the first year he went down, you know, so when I went back to the Chinese president, he told me, look, you have given me a bad advice, you know, but, and then there is a sentence that politically will have importance for the Americans also. I shall go on buying euros for two reasons. First of all, because the euro will go up, and he was right. Second, because I want to live in a world in which there is no only one Lord. And so I want to live in a world in which there will be dollars and euro and not only one dominating. And reflect how things have changed in a few years. Now the Chinese don't talk anymore about the euro. They talk about a currency made by summing up the major world currency, renminbi included. In a few years, how deep the change of power has been in the world, you know. And so it's, I've told you that how big has been the achievement of Europe, but in the last years, the Europe rate of growth has gone down. If you compare, let's say, 98, the last decade before the crisis, 98 to 2007, you have Europe growing 2.4%, US 3.1, Russia 5.4, China 9 and 10. So you have some sort of, let's say, mm, not tragic, but some sort of malaise in the European economy, the difficulty of making reform, the old age of average, Europeans, the increasing of average age. So you have, this type of problem, even if in terms of basic comparison, let's say in the distribution of income, in the degree of equality, Europe is performing a little better than US or other high-level income countries. Little, because there is not much different, because the the difference in income has increased over all the world in the last generation. This is sad, but so is life. Both in the United States and in Europe. But the degree of inequality in Europe is a little less than in the other big areas. Also, in terms of absolute poverty, that in terms of social protection, but this, of course, becomes more and more difficult if the rate of growth decreases as we did in the last year. So we are still in a better situation, but with a lot of danger ahead of us if we don't keep going. But summing up with the good news, Europe is, in terms of GNP, the first entity in the world because of the number of population and the level of income. In terms of export, bigger than US. In terms of export, is bigger than China. Balanced Brexit. The euro had a stabilizing effect during the crisis. Without the euro, we should have had a competitive devaluation, some sort of disaster that we avoided only because of the euro. But, and so this is the sad part of my speech, in the world, Europe is not an actor. It's simply a spectator. When I go to Middle East, or I go to any part of the world, or to China, the attention is United States, the new countries like China or India, the BRICS, and Europe is a spectator. Why? Why? After what I told you, after the new innovation, after, it's quite interesting because there is no contradiction. This is, I try to describe the reality, even if I am passionate for the sake of Europe, because I think that for the future of the world, Europe and the link between US and Europe is absolutely necessary for preserving peace, democracy, and so on. But why? I have to be honest to explain you, because let us take, why is a spectator? Take the world crisis. The world crisis started from United States, but US government and the Chinese government, they have taken immediate decision, an injection, maybe more, maybe less than expected. I don't judge that, but the decision was immediate, strong, and $800 billion were injected into the economy. In China, $585 billion were injected. In Europe, each country has made its own policy. Very timid in Germany, lavish in UK, government centered in defending industry in France. So it's so when you have, so you are not. I am not surprised that now this timid recovery, that is not yet a recovery, but is some sort of early spring, let's say, or early or late winter. I don't know how to call it. Is fantastic in China. Well, not so bad in US, and not yet started in Europe. But the explanation is this: you have no common decision in Europe, and so you have a common market, you have a common currency, but you have not a common economic policy. First objection, and so it's and second, when I go to Middle East, and I did last week in Israel and Palestine, and I told, where is the European voice? Why you are not? And the explanation is simple. We have no common foreign policy. And so even in the world financial governance, there are different opinions. So it's a giant, Europe, but shaped is a giant, but made by many dwarf. So it's difficult to have, and then even the budget is very limited. If you know that the European budget is 1% of European GDP, 1%. The federal budget in the US is 30 and something, it's 1%. And with this 1%, we have to do the regional policy, the, let's say, education policy, foreign policy, everything, So it's, how can you have a voice in the world, So your question, Mark, that you posed me tonight, can Europe change the world? It's difficult to say yes with the existing power and the existing structure, and so it's we are in front of this dilemma. Do we go on, and then we can have a voice in the power, or are we happy because we have become wealthy, we have preserved democracy, we have an area of let's say fairly good government, or and this is the dilemma in which we live. There was a proposal of a new constitution. This was blocked by French and Dutch referendum. Then, some sort of compromise, the low compromise, that is the Lisbon Treaty. This was blocked by the Irish referendum. Then there was a second referendum, and thanks God was approved. But with this, slow going and difficult and compromise, and so it's to have to answer yes to your question, can Europe change the world? I have to put some condition. Yes, we can, but first of all, we must end with the rule of unanimity. Now we are 27 countries, and anything important must be approved at unanimity. With the Lisbon Treaty, something can be approved with the majority, something more than in the past, but the big decision must be taken. And, unanimity is impossible in politics. It was impossible, difficult when we were 6 countries, now when you are 27. And then there are countries that has a very different view about the future of Europe. UK, especially the British public opinion reacts in a very different way from the French or the German public opinion. So it's then, of course, you have also that seems to be very trivial, very naive, my observation. But when you think to the languages, when I was president of the Commission, there were only 3 working languages: French, English, or German. And so I was speaking only English or French. But when I was entering into the European Parliament, I was speaking only Italian, because this is the language of belonging, And so in the Parliament you have 22 different languages. thing to interpretation, and I found the problem of being impossible to have the interpreters, because if you have 22 languages, you need 22 multiplied 21 interpreters. And so we adopted, you will laugh for that, we adopted the Soviet Union system to have a pivot language that in the Soviet Union meeting was Russian and was translated from Tajikistan to Russian and then to, let's say, Armenian, And so we are adopted the pivot language that can be English, generally English or French, and then from Maltese to English and from English to, but the national identity is so strong that the Maltese, to give they speak among them. In Malta they speak in English among them, but in Brussels they speak Maltese. But it's not, it's a serious, it's because Europe is not killing the identities. It's putting together the political will to get goals, but not, I remain Italian, But in the new world, and then I finish because and the unanimity. Second, the budget fitted to the ambition, and third, I'm sad to say, but you need also an exit clause. If a country does not be a member, there must be a way out, for a simple reason. And this is not easy to accept, So it's, the world has changed so much. The Chinese and the Indian rise and the Brazilian rise is changing the world. The U.S. dimension strength has changed the world. And I think that if Europe must give his contribution to the future, we must unite. I am Italian, and I want to remember you that in the Renaissance, the Italian states, they were dominating in every field of science, of military technique, finance, Rome, Florence, Genoa, Venice, they were really leading. They were the first globalization. The first globalization was the discovery of America. The other countries, Spain, France, UK, England, they make a national identity. The Italian states remained separated, and Italy disappeared from the world map. This is history. And now Germany, France, UK are in the same situation. But it's difficult to convince the national politician of that, but this is the crude truth. This is the reality which we are living now, Of course, you can go on for 10, 20 years in the present situation, but the change of the world is clear. And so if we don't put the different European countries together, this country will disappear from the world map as the Italian states did. So this is why I'm so warm, so happy for what Europe has achieved, but also so worried and so pushing for the future, because it's clear that there is a danger of being irrelevant in the world. So we can be wealthy, but you can't go on to be irrelevant for a long time. Then even your wealth, your let's say high level of civilization suffers because of that. And so this is why I give you answer. Yes, Europe can change the world, but first of all must change Europe. And this is the instrument to change the world.